Joanna and I didn't just meet in Hawaii. We spent a good deal of time together. I fell in love with your daughter. She fell in love with me.
Remember when a movie about one dinner conversation managed to make an entire country deeply uncomfortable and then win 2 Oscars anyway? Released in 1967 by Columbia Pictures, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner follows Joanna Drayton, played by Katharine Houghton, who brings her fiancé home to meet her parents, played by Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn, and casually announces that she's getting married. The fiancé is Dr. John Prentice, played by Sidney Poitier. He's accomplished, charming, and apparently the last person her very liberal parents expected to actually have to be liberal about. The family gathering also housed memorable roles from Isabel Sanford, Cecil Kellaway, and Bea Richards. Today we're going to count down 15 weird facts about Guess Who's Coming to Dinner that you probably never knew. And stick around for number 1 because Katharine Hepburn's tears in that final scene were real. And the reason why makes the whole movie hit completely differently. But before we get into it, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the bell. It helps YouTube put this in front of more classic film fans who'd want to see it. All right, let's go drop a bomb on Mom and Dad. Number 15, the film that nobody in Hollywood would touch. By 1966, Stanley Kramer had spent his entire career making movies that nobody else in Hollywood wanted to make. Racism, nuclear war, fascism, the whole cheerful lineup. Columbia Pictures knew exactly who he was and what they were getting when they worked with him, which makes it all more remarkable that even Kramer couldn't get this one off the ground easily. The subject was interracial marriage, and according to Sidney Poitier, no producer and no director could get the money for it. And even if they could, theaters across the country wouldn't book it. The studios weren't ignorant of the topic. They were actively avoiding it. It had been essentially untouched on screen since the silent era. Kramer pushed it through anyway, with Poitier looking him dead in the eye before filming began and asking whether he thought the country was ready for it. Kramer's answer was no, but he made it anyway. Columbia's concerns didn't stay quiet either. The studio that had reservations about making it ended up releasing one of the most celebrated films of the decade. Hollywood's loss of nerve became Kramer's legacy. Number 14, 3 legends signed on without reading the script. Stanley Kramer pitched Guess Who's Coming to Dinner to Spencer Tracy, Katharine Hepburn, and Sidney Poitier without a finished screenplay. 3 of the most respected actors in Hollywood history. All 3 said yes without reading a single page, which in any era of Hollywood makes agents physically ill. Now, Tracy had worked with Kramer before and trusted him. Hepburn had no prior working relationship with Kramer whatsoever. She came on board out of devotion to Tracy and genuine belief in the subject matter. Then Kramer went to Poitier with a pitch that was half idea, half leverage, no script. But Tracy and Hepburn are already in. Poitier's answer was immediate. I don't know if you can bring it off with the studio, but I'll do it. Absolutely. 3 commitments, 0 pages of dialogue.
We can explain.
You can?
Of course we can.
What makes this genuinely staggering is the position that these people were in. These weren't grateful newcomers happy to have a phone call returned. These were A-list legends with the clout to dictate their own terms on any production in the industry. Any one of them could have demanded a completed script, rewrites, casting approval, and a fruit basket of specific requirements before agreeing to anything. But instead, all 3 looked at an unfinished pitch from a director that they collectively trusted and decided that that was enough information to commit their names, time, and reputation to a film that existed mostly inside Kramer's head. The film went on to become one of the most celebrated pictures of the decade, which suggests that Kramer knew exactly what he was doing, even when nobody else had read it yet. Number 13, their love story was illegal in 17 states. Now, when Guess Who's Coming to Dinner came out in 1967, the central relationship in the film, a white woman and a black man planning to get married, was a criminal offense in 17 U.S. states, an actual crime. Interracial marriage was still illegal across a significant chunk of America when audiences were buying tickets to watch this movie, which meant that Columbia Pictures was essentially distributing a film where the happy ending was legally actionable in nearly a third of the country. Great marketing challenge, terrible legal climate. Now, the couple on screen could have been arrested for the exact relationship the movie spent 2 hours asking audiences to celebrate. Sidney Poitier and Katharine Houghton played 2 people in love. 17 state governments had paperwork ready for people like them. And yet, there sat audiences, popcorn in hand, watching this play out on the big screen. Some of them in states were walking out of that theater and doing what those characters were doing would have landed them in a courtroom. The dinner table arguments in the film, they weren't just dramatic tension. They were a live broadcast of a debate that the country was actively, legally having in real time. Most love stories ask you to root for two people to find each other. This one asked you to root for two people to find each other while half the country's legal system was still working out whether that was anybody's right. Number 12, making this movie came with death threats. Kramer understood exactly what kind of reaction this film would generate. He knew that a meaningful portion of the audience would leave the theater furious. He knew the subject matter would make everyone attached to the production a target, but he walked onto the set and still made it. He was right about the reaction. After the film opened, Kramer received death threats, real ones, delivered specifically because he had the nerve to put an interracial relationship on a movie screen. Katharine Houghton started getting hate mail for the same reason. She said to herself, "After the movie came out, I began to get hate mail and death threats. The character was fictional. The people sending letters were very much not."
He's so calm and sure of everything. He doesn't have any tensions in him.
The specific trigger for most of it was the interracial kiss depicted in the film, a moment that ran a few seconds on screen and then generated enough fury to fill Kramer's mailbox for months. He predicted all of it before filming began, made the film anyway, and turned out that being right about the backlash and refusing to let it stop you aren't mutually exclusive. Number 11, the 5-week script that paid like a lifetime deal. William Rose and Stanley Kramer wrote the screenplay for Guess Who's Coming to Dinner in 5 weeks. Most screenwriters spend longer than that arguing with themselves over a title page. Kramer paid Rose $200,000 for the work, $50,000 for the story, $150,000 for the script, plus a share of the net profits. In the 60s, studio accountants were not accustomed to seeing that number attached to a single writer's name, and their blood pressure reportedly reflected that. Some reports at the time called it the highest per-week writing fee in Hollywood that decade. The two had already worked together on It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, so Kramer knew exactly what Rose was capable of delivering under pressure. Turns out $200K, that was a steal. The film grossed around $57 million on a $4 million budget. That quiet little profit-sharing clause transformed into one of the shrewdest financial moves that any screenwriter made in that entire era. Hollywood lawyers, I'm pretty sure, have been studying it ever since. Then, Rose walked up to the podium and collected the Academy Award for Best Original Screenplay. 5 weeks of work, a massive check, a profit share compounding in the background. Rose stacked it all in a single deal and presumably never rushed a script again. Number 10, Hepburn's daughter was family. Literally. The actress playing Joanna, the daughter who wanders home and drops the most uncomfortable dinner announcement in movie history, she wasn't just playing Katharine Hepburn's daughter on screen. She was her actual niece in real life. Katharine Houghton. Same family, almost the same DNA. The resemblance audiences noticed wasn't a casting department working overtime. It was just genetics doing the heavy lifting. It started with Hepburn. When Kramer said he needed someone that looked like she and Tracy could actually have raised her, well, Hepburn had a name ready. But this wasn't purely a case of famous aunt opens a door and then the niece walks through it. Houghton had to audition, and Kramer hired her because he was genuinely impressed. He said that she seemed exactly what Hepburn's daughter would be. Which, look, given the circumstances, was about the most useful thing a casting director could say. Hepburn showed up on the first day of filming, even though she had no scenes scheduled. She walked onto the set and announced to everyone in earshot, "In case my niece drops dead from the excitement, I'm here and I know all her lines too." That's classic Hepburn, completely on brand. But for Houghton, this was her film debut, her first major role. Legendary aunt as the co-star, and a movie carrying the cultural weight of a live grenade with the pin pulled. Now, most actors would have quietly backed out and blamed a scheduling conflict, but she showed up and she held her own. That genuine connection added something that no amount of rehearsal could manufacture. The push and pull between Hepburn and Houghton in those family scenes, well, that carries a texture that feels lived in. Because to some degree, it was. Two women who actually knew each other playing two women who absolutely knew each other. Number 9. Poitier had an Oscar, and he still got starstruck. Sidney Poitier walked onto the set of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner with an Oscar already on his shelf from Lilies of the Field.
Join in with me, all right? Okay, all you have to sing is amen.
Amen.
Nick down, man. Amen.
Amen.
The man was not an amateur. He was not someone who was rattled easily. And yet, during one particularly intense scene, Poitier hit a wall. Lines weren't landing. The timing was off. The energy was strong. So he turned to director Stanley Kramer and made a request that nobody saw coming. He asked for Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn to leave. Kramer obliged. The two legends walked off set, and Poitier performed the entire scene opposite of two empty chairs, with a dialogue coach reading lines from off camera. And suddenly, everything clicked, which says less about Poitier's nerves and more about the sheer gravitational pull of Tracy and Hepburn in a room. These were two people whose combined filmography could crush a lesser actor's confidence just by existing nearby. Even someone at Poitier's level apparently needed them out of his eye line to find the performance. The empty chairs worked, the scene came together, and somewhere offset, two of Hollywood's greatest legends were presumably just waiting to be let back in. Number 8, a single joke got pulled mid-run. Now, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner had a throwaway joke referencing Martin Luther King Jr. that landed perfectly during its theatrical run. Audiences laughed, the moment passed, and the film moved on. The line belonged to Tilly, the Drayton's housekeeper played by Isabel Sanford. When told yet another guest was coming to dinner, she shot back with a sarcastic one-liner. The Reverend Martin Luther King, and audiences, well, they laughed at it for months.
Guess who's coming to dinner now?
The Reverend Martin Luther King.
But then, April 4th of 1968 arrived and completely destroyed the context. Dr. King was assassinated, and that joke, it stopped being a joke. The same line that had gotten comfortable laughs from audiences since December suddenly became the last thing anyone in a theater wanted to sit through. Columbia Pictures was still in the middle of the film's theatrical run when it happened, which meant that they had a decision to make faster than anyone in Hollywood prefers to make decisions. Leave the line in and let audiences absorb that collision in real time, or you cut it. They cut it. Columbia contracted theater owners directly and requested that the scene be removed from their prints, and went further than just asking. They provided hands-on instruction on how to physically snip the scene from each print. It was a rolling removal across theaters nationwide, and by August of 1968, almost all showings had the line gone. The line was eventually restored as early as 1969 in many prints, and preserved in full-in home releases once enough time had passed to separate the joke from the moment that had permanently rewritten its meaning. But during those months in 1968, Columbia did something that the film industry almost never manages. It acknowledged that reality had completely overtaken the script, and moved without waiting for a committee to approve the decision. Hey, quick pause. If you're enjoying this, hit that like button and subscribe. Guess Who's Coming to Dinner is one of those films where the behind-the-scenes story is almost as wild as what ended up on screen. And I promise you don't want to miss the rest of this countdown. All right, let's get back to this family gathering. Number 7, Hepburn hit a bronze Tracy right there on set. Katharine Hepburn wasn't just one of the greatest actresses that Hollywood ever produced. She was also a genuinely skilled sculptor. And during the making of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, those two things quietly collided in the most personal way imaginable. Hepburn had sculpted a small 3-inch bronze bust of Spencer Tracy herself, considered it one of her most prized possessions, and kept it on her bedside table, and took it with her when she traveled. When cameras started rolling on their final film together, that sculpture ended up on the bookshelf behind the desk where Poitier makes his phone call. No announcement, no close-up. The film doesn't draw attention to it. Most viewers have watched this movie multiple times and never caught it, but it's there. Tracy's likeness, crafted by Hepburn's own hands, tucked into the last film that they ever made together. After Hepburn's death, the bust went to Sotheby's as part of her estate. Pre-auction estimate, $3,000 to $5,000. It sold for $316,000. The room cheered. Now, once you know to look for it, you'll spend the whole scene staring at the wrong thing, which honestly is the kind of detail that makes a rewatch feel like a completely different movie. Number 6, no insurance company would touch Spencer Tracy. Now, Spencer Tracy was so ill during production that getting him insured was nearly impossible. Normal coverage was out of the question. The situation looked desperate enough that at one point it seemed like the whole production would shut down before a single scene was shot. Kramer found one insurer willing to take the risk, at a premium of $71,000. To get Columbia across the finish line, he and Katharine Hepburn did something that almost never happens on top of that. They placed their own full salaries in escrow. So if Tracy couldn't finish, that money went straight to the studio to cover the cost of reshooting his scenes with another actor. Two forms of financial protection stacked on top of each other just to get cameras rolling. Tracy, by most accounts, never found out. Kramer and Hepburn carried that quietly, because the last thing a man fighting through serious illness needs is the knowledge that two people that he cares about have financially chained themselves to his survival. Kramer also kept two completely separate shooting plans running throughout production, one that was built around Tracy and one designed to work without him. Every day Tracy showed up was a day that the backup plan stayed in the drawer. It stayed there. Tracy made it through every scene, which is the only acceptable outcome for a plan B of that particular variety. Number 5, Tracy finished filming and then died 17 days later. Spencer Tracy wrapped his last scene on this film on May 24th of 1967.
Dr. Prentice and I met in Hawaii, and we flew back in the same plane this morning.
Oh, well.
When he finished, Kramer told the crew that it represented a heroic act, a conquest for everyone involved. Tracy himself, before leaving the set for the last time, turned to the cast and crew and said, "If you people can have anything approaching what we have, then you can understand what love is. And 17 days later, he was gone. 2 days after that, the Supreme Court handed down its ruling in Loving v. Virginia, which made interracial marriage legal nationwide. The relationship at the center of this film, still a criminal offense in 17 states when cameras first rolled, went from legally actionable to constitutionally protected while Tracy's body was barely in the ground. The film didn't premiere until December. By the time audiences filed in, the controversial premise the studio had nervously hedged bets against was already the law of the land. Tracy delivered that final monologue without ever knowing any of it. The ruling, reception, or how completely history would validate every risk that Kramer took to get it made. Number 4, Hollywood remade it and flipped the script. In 2005, Hollywood decided Guess Who's Coming to Dinner was worth revisiting with one very deliberate twist. They flipped races. The remake, simply titled Guess Who, starred Bernie Mac as the overprotective father and Ashton Kutcher as the boyfriend that nobody asked for. Same basic premise, same uncomfortable family dinner energy, except now the disapproving dad was black and the guy showing up to derail the meal was white. Gone was the weighty social drama of the original. This version leaned hard into broad comedy, and audiences, they largely went along with it. The film grossed $103 million worldwide on a $35 million budget. Bernie Mac, as he almost always did, walked away with every scene he was in. Critics were considerably less enthusiastic than ticket buyers, but the production was a footnote worth knowing about. Kutcher wore a red Kabbalah bracelet through filming, and the studio decided that it had to go. So they paid $100,000 to digitally erase it from every scene in the movie. Every scene except one. It's still sitting right there on his wrist during the breakfast scene. Plain as day. Of course, if you know to look for it. $100,000, just one missed frame. Somewhere, an editor has never fully recovered. Number 3, the Oscars didn't look away. For a film that the studio had nearly walked away from funding, Guess Who's Coming to Dinner showed up at the Academy Awards like it owned the place. 10 nominations total. You had Best Picture, Best Director, Best Original Screenplay, which William Rose took home, and a posthumous Best Actor nomination for Spencer Tracy, who had been gone for 10 months by the time that his name was called. Katharine Hepburn won Best Actress, her second Oscar, for a performance that she would later say she couldn't fully separate from the grief that she was carrying while she gave it.
And that whatever makes you happy is my happiness, too.
Of course I know that.
And then there was Bea Richards, the veteran actress who played Dr. Prentice's mother, the one who corners Matt Drayton and reads him completely in about 30 seconds flat. She earned a Best Supporting Actress nomination for a role that could have been a footnote and instead became one of the most quietly devastating performances in the film.
If we're going to accept the thing at all, it seems to me, we'll have to trust the two of them and accept that they know what they're doing.
She didn't win, but the nomination stood as proof that the Academy, at least that year, wasn't about to pretend that she hadn't been the most electric person in every scene that she was in. Number 2, Poitier was playing this story right before he lived it. Now, Sidney Poitier spent the making of this film playing a black man who has to stand in a room and defend his right to be with a woman that he loves to her skeptical white family. It was 1967. The role hit differently than most, but 2 years later, on the set of The Lost Man, Poitier met a white Canadian actress named Joanna Shimkus, and they started a relationship. They had 2 daughters together and eventually married in 1976, staying together until his death in 2022. 45 years. So the man who spent weeks on a soundstage arguing the case for an interracial relationship on screen only walked off that set and not long after quietly started living one. There was no studio setup, no script, just a real version of the exact thing the movie had asked audiences to accept. Dr. John Prentice, he would have approved. Number 1, Katharine's tears were never in the script. That final monologue, Spencer Tracy delivering a speech about love and memory while Katharine Hepburn stands across from him, is the scene that people remember. Most assume that they're watching 2 legends hitting their marks perfectly. They're half right. The scene took a full week to shoot, built entirely around whatever Tracy had available on any given day. Short windows, constant recalibration. When he finally got through it start to finish in one complete take, the entire crew stood up. Tracy was too spent to respond. He just stood there while the people around him acknowledged what they just witnessed. A career that had spanned decades, ending with a standing ovation and a man too exhausted to speak. As for Hepburn's tears, those tears weren't constructed emotion deployed for effect. She wasn't listening to a character. She was listening to the man that she'd loved for over 25 years. And she knew that she was running out of chances to hear him like this. Real grief that accidentally became cinema. And then she walked away from it entirely. Katharine Hepburn never watched it. Not once. Because for her, It wasn't a landmark or legendary piece. It was the last footage that existed of Spencer Tracy, and one viewing was all she could bear. History spent decades calling it one of the greatest performances she ever gave. Hepburn, by all accounts, agreed that it probably was accurate and decided history was welcome to it. And there you have it, 15 weird and wild facts about Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Which fact hit you the hardest? Drop it in the comments, and hey, if you know someone who loves this film, share it with them. Don't forget to subscribe. And until next time, this is Remember When.